I sat quietly at the Thanksgiving table while my sister Jennifer bragged about her new promotion. Nobody had asked about my life in years. When Dad mentioned his retirement worries, I casually said, I could help. I sold my company last month for $170 million. The turkey knife clattered from Jennifer's hand. Dad froze mid-sentence, wine glass suspended in air. Mom gasped. For years, they had treated me like I was invisible. Now, suddenly, I had everyone's undivided attention for the first time in my life. Growing up as the middle child was like existing in a permanent shadow. My older sister Jennifer was the golden child, bringing home perfect report cards and dazzling our parents with her plans to become a surgeon. My younger brother Brian was the family charmer, winning football trophies and making friends wherever he went. Then there was me, Wilbur Parker, quietly sitting between them at the dinner table, perpetually forgotten. Jennifer got accepted to the advanced placement program. Dad would announce proudly at family gatherings, his hand resting on her shoulder. She'll be the first doctor in our family. Mom would quickly add, and Brian just got selected for the Regional Youth Football League. The coach says he's never seen such natural talent. Mom would quickly add, then they'd fall silent, conversation moving on to other topics while I sat waiting for acknowledgement that never came. I'd eventually clear my throat and mention my computer science competition win, or my perfect math score, only to have Dad respond with, "That's nice, Wilbur." Now, who wants to hear about Jennifer's volunteer work at the hospital? By age 12, I'd stopped expecting validation. My room became my sanctuary, filled with computers I'd assembled from parts bought with lawn mowing money, while Jennifer prepared for medical school and Brian dominated the high school social scene. I taught myself programming languages and built primitive software that could solve complex math equations. He's always playing those computer games, I overheard Mom tell Aunt Susan during a family barbecue when I was 14. We're hoping he'll grow out of it and find something more practical. High school graduation should have been my moment. I'd finished second in my class, earned a full scholarship to Stanford for computer science, and won the state technology competition. But as I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I spotted my family in the audience. Mom was wiping away tears while checking her phone for updates on Jennifer's medical school acceptance. Dad was there physically, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. Only Brian offered a genuine smile and thumbs up as I returned to my seat with my diploma clutched in my hand. That evening we celebrated at home. Or rather, we celebrated Jennifer's acceptance to Johns Hopkins Medical School, which happened to coincide with my graduation day. A toast, Dad said, raising his glass, to Jennifer, who's making the Parker family proud by following her dreams. No mention of my achievement, no acknowledgement of my scholarship. When dinner ended, I retreated to my room, the familiar ache of invisibility settling in my chest. College offered escape. At Stanford, people saw me for the first time. Professors praised my innovative approaches to programming problems. Classmates sought my help with assignments. I blossomed in the recognition, throwing myself into every project with renewed passion. During my junior year, I developed a rudimentary cybersecurity program that caught the attention of the computer science department head. She connected me with industry professionals who offered guidance and encouragement. For the first time, I felt my path crystallizing before me. I called home, eager to share my breakthrough. "That's great, son," Dad said distractedly. "Listen, can I call you back? Brian just made assistant coach at his old high school, and we're heading out to celebrate." The call back never came. Senior year arrived, bringing with it my graduation ceremony. I'd finished top of my class in computer science, with job offers from several major tech companies already in hand. As graduates filed into the stadium, I scanned the crowd, searching for familiar faces. They weren't there. Later, I received a text from Mom. "Sorry we couldn't make it. Jennifer's residency ceremony was today too. You understand." I did understand. Finally and completely. As I stood alone after the ceremony, Watching other graduates celebrate with their families, something hardened inside me. The last ember of hope that my family might someday see me extinguished, replaced by cool resolve. I would build my future without their validation. I would succeed on my own terms. And maybe someday, they'd realize what they'd missed all along. My first apartment after college was a tiny studio in Palo Alto. At 400 square feet, it barely accommodated a bed and desk, but the rent consumed nearly half my salary from the entry-level IT job I'd taken while developing my own software on the side. Every night after my day job ended, I'd work until 2 or 3 in the morning on my cybersecurity project. I'd recognized a gap in the market during an internship my senior year. Most security software reacted to threats after detection, but mine would predict and prevent attacks before they occurred. The algorithm was complex, requiring months of coding, testing, and refining. "You look exhausted," my coworker Tom commented one morning as I refilled my 4th cup of coffee. "Late night?" "Every night's a late night," I replied, rubbing my eyes. "But it'll be worth it when my software's ready for market." 6 months into development, I hit a wall. The predictive engine worked in controlled tests, but needed more processing power and resources to scale properly. I needed capital, at least $50,000, to hire additional programmers and secure better equipment. I stared at my phone for an hour before making the call. Despite everything, my family remained my family, and Dad had always prided himself on supporting real business ventures. Perhaps he'd see the potential in mine. "A family dinner?" "Of course you're welcome," Mom said when I called, sounding genuinely pleased. "This Sunday works. It'll be nice to have everyone together." For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope as I arrived at my parents' suburban home that Sunday. I'd prepared a detailed business plan, complete with market analysis and projected returns. Maybe, finally, they'd see that my computer hobby was something substantial. Jennifer arrived last, making a grand entrance in surgical scrubs, apparently coming directly from a hospital shift. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, accepting Mom's embrace. "We had an emergency appendectomy, and I assisted the chief resident." "That's our girl," Dad beamed, pulling out her chair. "Saving lives already." "Just assisting," Jennifer corrected, though her smug smile suggested she enjoyed the exaggeration. Throughout dinner, conversation revolved around Jennifer's residency and Brian's new coaching position. When Mom finally turned to me and asked, "So what's new with you, Wilbur?" it felt like an afterthought. "Actually," I said, sitting up straighter, "I've developed a cybersecurity software that could revolutionize how companies protect their data. I've got interest from several potential clients, but I need some startup capital to scale operations." I slid my business plan across the table toward Dad. He glanced at it without opening the folder. "Cybersecurity, huh?" Jennifer interjected. "Isn't that just glorified IT work?" "No," I replied firmly. "It's developing predictive algorithms to prevent data breaches before they happen. The market potential is enormous." Dad finally opened the folder, flipping through pages with increasing skepticism. "How much are you looking for?" $50,000, I said. "As a loan, of course. The projections show I could repay it within 18 months, with interest." Jennifer snorted into her wineglass. Dad closed the folder. "Wilbur," he said in the patronizing tone I'd heard throughout my childhood, "this is a fantasy, not a business plan. Get a real job like your sister, one with stability, benefits, a clear path forward." "I have a real job," I countered, feeling heat rise to my face. "This would be in addition to that. Playing with computers isn't a career path," Dad continued. "Jennifer's making something of herself. Why can't you follow her example?" Mom placed her hand over mine. "We just want what's best for you, honey. Maybe it's time to put these computer dreams aside." I looked to Brian, who at least had the decency to appear uncomfortable, but he remained silent, staring at his plate. "I'm not asking for charity," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. This is a solid business opportunity. I'd sign a formal loan agreement. The answer is no, Dad stated flatly. I'm not throwing good money after bad. The meal continued with strained conversation about safer topics. Neighborhood gossip, Jennifer's dating prospects, Brian's team's chances in the upcoming season. I said little, the business plan sitting untouched beside my plate, a physical reminder of their lack of faith in me. As I prepared to leave, Jennifer cornered me by the door. "Don't take it personally," she said, though her tone lacked any real sympathy. "Dad's just being practical. Not everyone is cut out for success." I drove home that night with white knuckles on the steering wheel, my siblings' and parents' dismissal ringing in my ears. The familiar pain of being overlooked had crystallized into something harder, more determined. I would succeed, not despite my family's lack of support, but entirely without it. 2 weeks later, I attended a tech meetup downtown, more out of obligation to a coworker than genuine interest. As I nursed a beer in the corner, watching Programmers Network, a silver-haired man in a tailored suit approached. "That's an interesting algorithm you've got on your laptop," he commented, gesturing to my open screen where I'd been tweaking code during the event's duller moments. "Thanks," I replied, surprised anyone had noticed. "Samuel Grant," he said, extending his hand. "I run a venture capital firm focusing on cybersecurity startups." Our conversation lasted hours, extending to a nearby diner long after the meetup ended. Samuel asked pointed, intelligent questions about my software's functionality, market potential, and competitive advantages. Unlike my family, he actually listened to my answers. "You've got something promising here," Samuel said finally, sliding his business card across the table. "Come to my office tomorrow. I think we might be able to help each other." The next day, Samuel's firm offered me $75,000 in seed funding for a 20% stake in my company, which we formally named Secure Vision. For the first time, someone believed in my vision enough to invest in it. As the months passed, I gradually reduced contact with my family. I sent obligatory birthday and Christmas cards, but declined most invitations to family gatherings. They rarely called anyway, and when they did, conversations were superficial, devoid of any real interest in my life. After 8 months of development with my small team, we were still struggling to secure major clients. Despite improvements to the software, corporations were hesitant to trust a startup with their security needs. We needed a breakthrough, and funds were running dangerously low. Then, at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, my phone rang. "Is this W. Parker of Secure Vision?" asked an unfamiliar voice. "Speaking," I confirmed, setting aside the code I'd been reviewing. "This is Gerald Matthews, Chief Security Officer at Westfield Financial. We're experiencing what appears to be a major breach attempt. Your software just flagged it as a Level 9 threat, but our regular security protocols aren't detecting anything. Is this a false positive?" My heart raced as I remotely accessed Westfield's system. "No, sir. Your network is currently under sophisticated attack through a backdoor in your third-party payment processing system. The breach hasn't been detected by conventional software because it's disguising itself as authorized traffic." For the next 6 hours, I worked with Westfield's security team to repel what turned out to be one of the most sophisticated hacking attempts in banking history. By morning, when the attack had been neutralized and traced back to a notorious international cybercrime group, Gerald Matthews was calling me a hero. "Your software saved us from what could have been a multi-million-dollar breach," he told me as exhausted security staff finally headed home. "How did you detect what everything else missed?" "Predictive algorithms," I explained. "My software doesn't just look for known threat patterns. It anticipates how attacks might evolve and identifies suspicious behaviors before they trigger conventional alarms." By noon, Westfield Financial had signed a 3-year contract with Secure Vision worth $1.2 million. By the end of the week, as news of the thwarted attack spread through industry channels, 3 more financial institutions had reached out for demonstrations. Secure Vision wasn't just viable anymore. Overnight, we had become the hottest cybersecurity startup in Silicon Valley. The 3 years following the Westfield incident transformed Secure Vision from a struggling startup into a cybersecurity powerhouse. After landing our first major contracts, I made a deliberate decision that would shape both my professional and personal life. I would operate publicly only as W. Parker, keeping my full identity separate from the company's growing profile. "Are you sure about this?" Samuel asked when I explained my plan to remain anonymous in press releases and media coverage. "Most founders want recognition. It helps with future ventures, speaking engagements, all the perks of success." "I'm sure," I replied. "I want the company valued for its technology, not personality-driven hype. Besides, I prefer my privacy." The truth, which I couldn't fully articulate even to Samuel, was that I wanted success on my own terms, completely separate from family validation. If my name became associated with a multi-million-dollar company, my parents and siblings would inevitably discover it. I wasn't ready for that yet. Secure Vision expanded rapidly, moving from my tiny apartment to a gleaming office in downtown Palo Alto. Our team grew from 3 to 30, then to over 100 employees across multiple departments. I handpicked each senior staff member, creating not just a company but a family of sorts, one built on mutual respect and recognition of each person's contributions. "We've just closed the Apex insurance contract," announced Maria, my chief operations officer, during our weekly leadership meeting. "That makes 17 of the top 50 financial institutions in the country using our security protocols. And the Department of Defense wants to discuss potential applications for government systems," added Raj, head of client relations. They were impressed by how we handled the attempted breach at National West last month. These victories felt sweeter because they were shared with people who valued my vision and abilities. At Secure Vision, I was never invisible. In contrast, my rare interactions with family remained stubbornly unchanged. During obligatory holiday phone calls, they still showed minimal interest in my life. "Are you still doing that computer thing?" Dad would ask, before quickly shifting to Jennifer's latest surgical accomplishment or Brian's coaching success. I kept my answers vague, mentioning only that I worked in IT security and was doing fine. They never pressed for details, apparently satisfied that I had at least found stable employment, if not the illustrious career they'd hoped for. Christmas of our 3rd year, I reluctantly attended the family gathering at my parents' home. Despite now having a net worth in the tens of millions, I arrived in a modest sedan, wearing a simple sweater and jeans. I brought typical gifts: a scarf for Mom, golf accessories for Dad, designer surgical scrub caps for Jennifer, and premium coaching equipment for Brian. "Thanks, little brother," Jennifer said, barely glancing at her gift before turning back to her detailed description of a complex surgery she'd performed. So anyway, as I was telling Dad, the patient had been declared inoperable by 2 other surgeons, but I identified an approach through the peripheral vessels that reduced the risk significantly. I sat quietly, listening to her self-aggrandizing story, noting how Mom and Dad hung on every word. When she finished, Dad raised his glass in a toast. "To Jennifer, who continues to make the Parker name synonymous with excellence. And to Brian," Mom added quickly, "whose team is heading to state championships." No mention of me. Some things never changed. After dinner, Jennifer cornered me in the kitchen as I helped Mom with dishes. "You know, Wilbur," she said, leaning against the counter, "if you're ever interested in making more of yourself, I could put in a word at the hospital. They always need good IT support, and it would be a step up from wherever you're working now." "Thanks," I replied neutrally, "but I'm satisfied with my current position." "Suit yourself," she shrugged, "just trying to help. It must be hard watching everyone else in the family achieve so much while you're still, well, you know." I did know. I knew exactly what my family thought of me and how completely wrong they were. But rather than satisfaction, I felt a hollow ache. Despite all my success, some small part of me still craved their recognition. a childhood wound that refused to fully heal. As SecureVision continued to grow, rumors of acquisition offers began circulating in the industry. Several tech giants had expressed interest in our proprietary algorithms and extensive client list. I rebuffed early inquiries, focusing instead on expanding our capabilities and market share. Then came the call from Horizon Technologies, the largest cybersecurity corporation in the world. "We're prepared to offer $150 million for SecureVision," stated their CEO during our initial meeting. "We believe your predictive technology would integrate perfectly with our existing security framework." $170 million, I countered, with guaranteed positions for my senior staff and continued development of our core technology. After 2 weeks of negotiations, Horizon agreed to my terms. At 32 years old, I had built and sold a company for $170 million. The night after signing the acquisition papers, Samuel and I celebrated with an expensive bottle of scotch on the balcony of my penthouse apartment. "To the most successful investment of my career," Samuel said, raising his glass. "And to the most determined founder I've ever mentored." "Thank you," I replied sincerely. "None of this would have happened without your initial faith in me." "That's not true," Samuel countered. "You would have found a way. That's who you are, Wilbur. Someone who succeeds despite obstacles, not because of advantages." As we looked out over the city lights, I felt both accomplished and strangely empty. I had proven myself by every objective measure, but the people whose validation I had once craved most remained oblivious to my achievement. "Have you thought about what's next?" Samuel asked, breaking into my thoughts. "Travel, philanthropy, maybe angel investing in promising startups," I answered. "But first, I think I need some time to figure out what really matters." Little did I know that fate would soon force me to confront the question of family and forgiveness in ways I never anticipated. 6 months after selling SecureVision, I had settled into a new rhythm of life. My penthouse in San Francisco served as home base, though I spent considerable time traveling hiking in Patagonia, exploring ancient temples in Japan, sampling culinary delights across Europe. Between adventures, I established the Parker Foundation, focusing on educational access for underprivileged students interested in technology. Despite financial freedom and meaningful work, something felt unresolved. The wound of family rejection had scarred over but never truly healed. I maintained minimal contact, sending birthday gifts and occasional texts but avoiding substantive interaction. My unexpected reconnection with family began at a Silicon Valley tech conference, where I'd been invited to speak anonymously as a successful entrepreneur sharing insights on startup exits. After my presentation, I was gathering my notes when someone called my name. "Wilbur? Wilbur Parker? Is that you?" I turned to find Brian, looking both surprised and pleased to see me. He appeared different than I remembered, thinner, with faint lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Brian," I replied, genuinely startled. "What are you doing at a tech conference?" "Consulting for my school district on athletic department software," he explained. "I never expected to run into you here. Are you working in tech now?" Mom and Dad just say, "You're doing computer stuff," whenever anyone asks. We moved to the conference center cafe, where conversation flowed more easily than I expected. Brian asked thoughtful questions about my life, showing more interest than he had during our childhood. "So what do you actually do?" he asked. "Some kind of IT security, right?" I gave my standard vague answer. "Something like that." "It pays the bills," Brian nodded, accepting my deflection without pressing further. Instead, he shared updates about his own life, his divorce 2 years earlier, his position as athletic director at our old high school, his 2 children now entering middle school. Notably absent was any mention of our parents or Jennifer. When I finally asked about them, Brian's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "They're managing," he said carefully. "You know how it is." We parted with promises to stay in better touch, exchanging phone numbers and a brief, awkward hug. Something in his hesitation about our family sparked my curiosity. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I checked my family's social media accounts. What I found surprised me. Jennifer's once frequent posts about surgical triumphs had been replaced by vague professional statements and links to medical articles. Her personal photos showed a strained smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dad's page, usually filled with proud announcements about Jennifer's achievements and Brian's coaching victories, had been dormant for months. His last post mentioned enjoying retirement, but lacked his usual enthusiasm. Mom's account revealed the most. Between recipe shares and community announcements were hints of financial strain, inquiries about part-time retail positions, questions in budget cooking groups, comments about making do with less in our golden years. Most telling was a local news article I discovered through a community page. Local surgeon faces malpractice allegations. The piece detailed a lawsuit against Jennifer's practice following complications in a routine procedure. Though not naming her specifically, the timing aligned with her social media silence. Further digging revealed more troubles. County property records showed a second mortgage on my parents' home taken out 18 months earlier. Brian's ex-wife had posted about medical bills finally paid, following what appeared to be a serious sports injury he had suffered. The picture emerging was clear. My family was struggling. Dad's retirement fund had likely been depleted, possibly to help Jennifer with legal costs. Mom had returned to work in her 60s. Brian had faced medical expenses following a career-altering injury. For 3 days, I wrestled with conflicted emotions. Part of me felt a vindictive satisfaction they had dismissed my potential and were now facing consequences of their own choices. Another part remembered moments of childhood connection. Dad teaching me to ride a bike, Mom nursing me through chickenpox, Jennifer helping with homework before our relationship soured, Brian standing up for me against neighborhood bullies. On the 4th day, I called Samuel for advice. "They're family," I said, summarizing my dilemma. "But they never treated me like I mattered." "The question isn't whether they deserve your help," Samuel replied thoughtfully. "It's whether helping them would bring you peace or just reopen old wounds." "What would you do?" I asked. "I'd get more information before deciding," he suggested. "You're working with assumptions based on social media and public records. Before making any decision, understand exactly what you're dealing with." Following his advice, I hired a discreet financial investigator to assess my family's situations more thoroughly. The comprehensive report confirmed my suspicions and revealed additional details. Jennifer's practice faced 3 malpractice lawsuits, with insurance covering only a portion of potential damages. Her professional reputation had suffered significantly. Dad had lost nearly 70% of his retirement savings through a combination of poor investments and loans to Jennifer for legal fees. The second mortgage on their home carried an unfavorable interest rate due to their diminished credit rating. Brian had suffered a spinal injury that ended his coaching career 2 years earlier. Medical bills had forced him to liquidate his modest savings and rely temporarily on disability benefits. He now worked reduced hours as an athletic director, supplementing his income with weekend shifts at a sporting goods store. Mom had taken a part-time position at a local department store to help cover household expenses, despite being well past retirement age. The report painted a picture of a family in decline, proud people, unwilling to admit their struggles publicly but quietly drowning in financial and personal setbacks. My initial plan was simple: anonymous financial help through restructured loans and trust arrangements that wouldn't reveal my involvement. I contacted financial advisors to begin setting up the necessary structures. Then came the email from Mom. "Thanksgiving dinner, hope you can join us." The timing felt significant, like the universe offering a crossroads. I could continue my path of detached assistance, remaining the invisible supporter as they had been the invisible family. Or I could show up, reveal everything, and see if genuine reconciliation was possible. I called Samuel again. "If I help anonymously, nothing really changes between us," I explained. "They'll never know it was me. never have to confront how they treated me, never have the opportunity to make amends. And if you reveal yourself as their potential savior? Samuel asked. Then I'll learn whether they value me, or just what I can provide, I replied. It's a test they might fail. Are you prepared for that possibility? The question hung in the air between us. I need to know, I finally answered. One way or another, I need to resolve this. 2 days later, I confirmed my attendance at Thanksgiving dinner, adding that I had news to share. Then I began preparing for what would likely be the most consequential family gathering of my life. As Thanksgiving approached, I outlined clear conditions for any financial assistance I might offer, not just monetary requirements, but relational ones. This wouldn't be a blank check, but an opportunity for genuine family reconstruction, if they were willing. The night before Thanksgiving, I sat in my hotel room in my hometown, reviewing photos of my family from happier times. There was 5-year-old me on Brian's shoulders at the beach, 10-year-old Jennifer teaching me to ride a bike, Mom and Dad applauding at my elementary school science fair. Somewhere along the way, we had lost each other. Tomorrow would determine if we could find our way back. Thanksgiving Day arrived with appropriate dramatic flair. Gray skies threatening rain, wind rattling bare branches against windows. I parked my rental car in front of my parents' house, noting the subtle signs of deferred maintenance, peeling trim paint, cracked driveway concrete, gutters sagging slightly at the corners. This wasn't the immaculate suburban showcase of my childhood. Like my family itself, the house had aged and diminished, its vulnerabilities more visible than before. I sat in the car for several minutes, rehearsing what I might say, how I might react to various scenarios. Finally, clutching a bottle of expensive wine and a bouquet for Mom, I approached the front door and rang the bell. Mom answered, her smile warming as she recognized me. She looked older than I remembered, new lines around her eyes, silver threading more prominently through her once auburn hair. She wore a simple dress with a worn apron, a far cry from the designer outfits she'd favored during my childhood. "Wilbur," she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that smelled of pumpkin spice and that familiar perfume she'd worn for decades. "I'm so glad you could make it. Come in. Come in, everyone's already here." The living room had changed little, though I noticed fewer decorative objects on display, as if the house had been subtly decluttered. Dad rose from his recliner to greet me, moving more stiffly than I remembered. His handshake was firm, but his smile strained. "Good to see you, son," he said with formal politeness. "Been a while." "Almost 2 years," I confirmed, matching his tone. "Work keeps me busy." Jennifer sat on the sofa, smartphone in hand, barely looking up as I entered. "The prodigal brother returns," she remarked with a thin smile. "How's the exciting world of IT support?" Before I could respond, Brian emerged from the kitchen with a beer in hand. His face brightened genuinely upon seeing me. "Wilbur, man, what are the odds twice in 1 month after years of nothing?" He clapped me on the shoulder with his free hand. "Good to have you here." The initial interactions set the tone for the pre-dinner hour. Mom fussing over appetizers and table settings. Dad making occasional comments about weather and sports. Jennifer alternating between checking her phone and making subtly condescending remarks about my presumed career. Brian making authentic efforts at connection. I contributed minimally to conversations, observing the family dynamics with new clarity. What struck me most was how performances had replaced genuine interaction. Everyone was playing a role. Dad, the still successful patriarch. Mom, the content homemaker. Jennifer, the accomplished professional. Brian, the supportive son. Only the occasional cracks Dad's winces when standing. Mom's frequent glances at Jennifer. Jennifer's tight jaw when her practice was mentioned revealed the strain beneath the surface. When Mom announced dinner was ready, we migrated to the dining room. The table was set with the good china, though I noticed several pieces missing from the complete set I remembered. The turkey looked smaller than in past years. The side dishes less numerous but carefully arranged to fill the table. "Wilbur," Mom said as we settled in, "would you mind carving? Your father's arthritis is bothering him today." Dad started to protest, but then nodded. handing me the carving knife with what seemed like reluctant relief. As I carved the turkey, the familiar choreography of a Parker family dinner commenced. Dad offered a brief blessing. Jennifer poured wine with commentary about its vintage. Mom encouraged everyone to take seconds before anyone had finished firsts. "So, Jennifer," Dad said after initial plates were served, "tell Wilbur about your practice. Still breaking new ground in cardiovascular surgery?" Jennifer's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Things are going well," she said vaguely. "We've had some interesting cases this year." Jennifer pioneered a new approach to aortic valve replacement. Dad continued proudly, as if she hadn't spoken. "Made quite a name for herself." "It was a team effort," Jennifer replied, cutting her turkey with unnecessary precision. "Always modest," Mom added. "The hospital administrator told me they considered Jennifer their rising star. I wondered when they'd last spoken with this administrator, given what I knew about the malpractice issues. And Brian," Dad pivoted. "The team's looking good for next season, even with the coaching change?" Brian nodded, though I detected hesitation. "The new head coach has a good system. I'm helping where I can from the AD's office." The conversation continued in this vein, carefully curated updates that emphasized achievements while glossing over struggles. No mention of Jennifer's legal troubles, Dad's investment losses, Mom's part-time job, or Brian's injury. No one asked about my life beyond perfunctory questions about where I was living and whether I enjoyed the computer work. As pumpkin pie was served, Dad's carefully maintained facade slipped slightly as conversation turned to his recent retirement. "I thought golf would occupy more of my time," he admitted, "but the membership fees at the country club keep rising. Might have to find a public course next year. Or take up a cheaper hobby," Mom suggested with forced lightness. "We're embracing simpler living these days." "The market hasn't been kind to retirement accounts," Dad added, swirling the last of his wine. "All those years of saving, and it doesn't stretch as far as we'd planned." Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I've told you I can help once we get past this rough patch at the practice." "We're managing fine," Dad insisted, though the tightness around his eyes suggested otherwise. I recognized the opening I'd been waiting for. Placing my fork beside my half-eaten pie, I took a deliberate sip of water. "Speaking of financial matters," I said casually, "I had some good news recently that might interest you." 4 pairs of eyes turned toward me with varying degrees of interest, polite but minimal from Dad and Jennifer, genuine from Brian, cautiously hopeful from Mom. "I sold my company last month," I continued in the same conversational tone. "The final price was $170 million. The reaction was everything I had anticipated and more." Jennifer's fork clattered against her plate. Pumpkin pie forgotten. Dad froze mid-sip, wine glass suspended in air. Mom's gasp was audible in the sudden silence. Brian's eyes widened, a slow smile spreading across his face. 100 and, Mom began, trailing off as if the number was too large to complete. $70 million. I finished for her. "What company?" Jennifer demanded, her voice sharper than intended. "Secure Vision," I replied. "I founded it about 4 years ago. We specialized in predictive cybersecurity algorithms." "You owned Secure Vision?" Brian exclaimed. "That's the company that saved Westfield Financial from that massive hack attempt. It was all over the news." "Wait," Dad interjected, setting down his wine glass carefully. "You're telling us you founded and sold a major technology company, and this is the first we're hearing about it?" "I mentioned I was starting a cybersecurity firm years ago," I reminded him, "at that Sunday dinner when I asked for a loan to expand operations. You told me to get a real job like Jennifer, that playing with computers wasn't a career path." The color drained from Dad's face as recognition dawned. Jennifer's expression shifted from shock to something more complicated disbelief mingled with dawning calculation. "But that was just an idea," Dad protested weakly. "You never said anything about actually succeeding with it." "You never asked," I replied simply. "So all this time," Jennifer said slowly, When we thought you were working some basic IT job, you were actually running a multi-million-dollar company? Correct. And now, you've sold it, Mom stated, as if confirming the reality to herself. For $170 million. After taxes and investor payouts, I netted about $120 million, I clarified, plus equity in the parent company that acquired us. The silence that followed was profound, filled with recalculations and reevaluations. I could almost see the mental adjustments happening behind each family member's eyes, particularly Jennifer's, whose expression had transformed from shocked to intently focused. "Well," she finally said, her voice shifting to a warmth I hadn't heard directed at me in decades. "This calls for a celebration. I think we have champagne in the cellar. This is incredible, Wilbur," Mom added, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "We always knew you were smart, but this is extraordinary." Dad cleared his throat, visibly struggling to process this new reality. "I'm surprised, son, and impressed. Very impressed. You should have told us sooner." "Why would I?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. When has my career ever been of interest to this family? The question hung in the air, uncomfortable but undeniable. "That's not fair," Dad began, but Brian interrupted. "It kind of is fair, Dad," he said quietly. "We never paid much attention to Wilbur's work. I'm as guilty as anyone." Jennifer returned with champagne, her entire demeanor transformed. Gone was the condescending surgeon, replaced by an attentive sister filling glasses with expensive precision. "To Wilbur," she proclaimed, raising her glass, "the secret success of the Parker family." As glasses clinked, I noted how quickly the family dynamics had shifted. Suddenly I was visible more than visible. I was central. The irony wasn't lost on me. "You must have some excellent investment advisors," Jennifer commented as she sipped her champagne. "I've been looking to diversify my portfolio beyond medical real estate. Perhaps we could discuss some opportunities for my practice. We're exploring expansion options." And there it was, the pivot I'd expected. So transparent it was almost amusing. No acknowledgement of past dismissals, just an immediate attempt to benefit from my newfound status. "I'd be happy to connect you with my financial team," I replied neutrally. "They're quite selective about clients, but I'm sure they'd make time for family." Jennifer's smile widened, missing the subtle barb entirely. "Wonderful. I have some innovative treatment protocols that just need proper backing. With the right investment, we could revolutionize cardiac care. No mention of malpractice suits or practice struggles. Just a seamless transition from dismissing me to seeing me as a potential cash flow." As pie plates were cleared and coffee served, the conversation revolved entirely around my success questions about Secure Vision, the acquisition process, my future plans. These same people who had never shown interest in my work were now hanging on every detail. I provided selective information, watching their reactions carefully. Behind the newfound admiration and excitement, I detected calculations happening, especially from Jennifer and Dad. Mom seemed genuinely proud, if somewhat bewildered by the revelation. Brian alone showed what appeared to be authentic happiness for me, without immediate self-interest. As the evening progressed, one thing became abundantly clear. My family saw my wealth as a solution to their problems, but not one had acknowledged how they had treated me all these years. The revelation had changed how they valued me, but not how they understood me. The test had yielded exactly the results I had feared, and in some ways, hoped it would. Now came the difficult part, deciding what to do with this knowledge. Coffee and dessert extended into an impromptu family gathering, unlike any I'd experienced before. For the first time in my memory, I was the center of attention in the Parker household, my opinions solicited, my stories eagerly received, my presence acknowledged as valuable. The transformation would have been comical if it weren't so painful in its transparency. Jennifer, who had barely glanced up when I arrived, now sat beside me on the sofa, laughing too loudly at my mild jokes. Dad repeatedly mentioned always believing in my potential, conveniently rewriting history. Mom kept squeezing my arm and saying, "My son, the millionaire," with wonder in her voice. Only Brian maintained some authenticity, his interest seemingly genuine rather than opportunistic. As the evening progressed, the inevitable financial discussions began in earnest. "So," Dad said during a lull in conversation, attempting casual indifference, "what does one do with that kind of liquidity? Investments? Real estate?" "Various things," I replied vaguely. "The Parker Foundation takes a significant portion." "You started a foundation?" Mom asked. "That's wonderful. What does it support?" "Educational access for underserved communities," I explained, "particularly in technology fields. We've established scholarship programs at several universities and coding boot camps in low-income areas." "That's really cool, Wilbur," Brian said sincerely. Jennifer nodded with manufactured enthusiasm. "Philanthropy is so important. I've always believed in giving back myself, though medical practice doesn't leave much time for it." A brief silence followed before Dad cleared his throat meaningfully. "You know, son, if you're looking for additional investment opportunities, I might have some suggestions. I've been researching several promising startups that just need capital to break through." The irony of Dad offering investment advice after losing most of his retirement fund was almost too much, but I kept my expression neutral. "I'm always open to hearing about opportunities," I replied diplomatically. "And, speaking of investments," Jennifer interjected, shifting closer on the sofa, "I've been developing a revolutionary approach to minimally invasive cardiac procedures. With the right backing, we could transform treatment protocols nationwide." No mention of the malpractice suits that threatened her practice's survival. No acknowledgement that just hours ago she had dismissed my career as mere IT support. "Sounds interesting," I said noncommittally. "It would require significant capital initially," she continued, warming to her pitch. "But the potential returns, both financial and in terms of lives saved, would be extraordinary. Perhaps we could discuss specifics over lunch next week. I could bring the business plan. The business plan. Just like the one Dad had dismissed years ago when I sought a loan that was a fraction of what Jennifer was now casually requesting. "Perhaps," I replied, taking a deliberate sip of coffee. As the evening continued, the financial overtures became increasingly transparent. Dad mentioned the unexpected expenses of retirement and how the market had been unkind to his investments. Mom spoke of house repairs they'd been planning to get around to. Jennifer repeatedly steered conversation back to her practice's expansion opportunities. Brian alone made no requests, though I knew from my research that his needs were perhaps the most legitimate. Around 10:30, as Jennifer was describing her latest innovative procedure while simultaneously hinting at the practice's capital requirements, something in me snapped. Not violently, but with quiet finality, like a thread pulled beyond its tensile strength. "It's interesting," I interrupted, setting down my coffee cup with deliberate care, "how quickly perspectives can change." A brief, confused silence followed. "What do you mean, dear?" Mom asked. 4 hours ago, I was the family disappointment, the computer guy with the ordinary IT job that no one bothered to ask about. Now I'm suddenly fascinating. I looked directly at Jennifer, worthy of lunch meetings and business proposals. Jennifer's smile faltered slightly. "That's not fair, Wilbur. We've always valued you." "Have you?" I asked quietly. "When was the last time any of you asked a meaningful question about my life before I mentioned money?" Dad straightened defensively. "Now wait a minute. We've always supported you." "No," I cut him off firmly. "You haven't, and we all know it." The room fell into uncomfortable silence. Brian studied his hands while Mom looked distressed. Jennifer's expression hardened into something more familiar, the dismissive look I remembered from childhood. "If you're going to hold grudges about perceived slights from years ago," she began. "Perceived slights?" I echoed incredulously. "Dad told me to get a real job when I presented the business plan for the company I just sold for 9 figures. You've consistently treated me as if my career was a hobby. None of you has ever shown genuine interest in my life or accomplishments. That's not entirely true, Mom protested weakly. Isn't it? When I graduated with honors from Stanford, you skipped the ceremony for Jennifer's residency event. When I was developing the security algorithm that eventually became Secure Vision's core product, Dad called it playing with computers. Every family gathering has centered around Jennifer's surgical career, and Brian's coaching. Never once has anyone asked substantive questions about my work. Dad's jaw tightened. We've always wanted what's best for all our children. No, I countered. You've always wanted what impressed you most. And that was never me. The veneer of celebratory family unity cracked completely. Jennifer's calculated warmth vanished, replaced by familiar disdain. So that's what this is about? She demanded. You made some money, and now you want to punish us for not praising you enough as a child? That's remarkably petty, Wilbur. This isn't about praise, I replied evenly. It's about recognition, basic interest, family connection, none of which changed until I mentioned money. You're being dramatic, Jennifer dismissed. Just because we didn't understand your computer obsession doesn't mean we didn't care. When Dad refused to loan me $50,000 for my startup money that would have returned millions in profit, he said I should get a real job like your sister. Those were his exact words. I turned to Dad. Do you remember that? Dad shifted uncomfortably. I might have said something similar, but you have to understand. I understood perfectly, I interrupted. Jennifer's career was real. Mine wasn't. That's ancient history, Jennifer scoffed. Are you really going to withhold help from your family over old misunderstandings? And there it was, the assumption that my purpose in revealing my success was to offer financial assistance, with no consideration that I might have other motivations. I never said anything about withholding help, I pointed out. I simply noted how quickly attitudes change when money enters the equation. So you are planning to help? Mom asked hopefully. I sighed, realizing how deeply ingrained the family patterns were. Even now, the conversation had shifted to what I could provide rather than addressing the underlying relationship issues. Before we discuss anything financial, I said firmly, we need to acknowledge the elephant in the room. This family has never valued me unless I had something tangible to offer. That dynamic needs to change before any other conversation can happen. That's ridiculous, Dad protested, though with less conviction than before. Is it? I challenged. Jennifer, when was the last time you asked about my life without an ulterior motive? Mom, when have you defended my choices with the same vigor you've championed Jennifer's? Dad, when have you expressed pride in my accomplishments the way you have Brian's athletic achievements? The silence that followed was telling. I don't think this conversation is productive, Jennifer finally said stiffly, standing up. If you're determined to use your financial situation to extract some kind of emotional ransom from this family, I'm not interested in participating. It's not ransom to ask for basic respect and acknowledgement, I countered. I think what Wilbur is saying has some merit, Brian interjected quietly. This unexpected support drew everyone's attention. We haven't been fair to him over the years. I know I've been guilty of it too. Jennifer shot him a betrayed look. Seriously? You're enabling this victim narrative? It's not a narrative if it's true, Brian replied. When's the last time you showed genuine interest in Wilbur's life, Jen? When's the last time any of us did? Mom's eyes filled with tears. I never meant to make you feel less important, Wilbur. I always loved all my children equally. Love isn't the issue, Mom, I said more gently. It's recognition, visibility, basic interest in who I am beyond surface appearances. Dad had grown increasingly quiet during this exchange, his expression troubled. Finally, he spoke. I may have been short-sighted, he admitted reluctantly. When you talked about computer security, it seemed abstract compared to Jennifer's medical work or Brian's coaching. I didn't understand it, so I didn't value it properly. This small acknowledgement, limited as it was, felt like the first crack in a long frozen surface. The issue goes deeper than career choices, I continued. It's about a family dynamic where some members matter more than others, where some achievements count while others don't. And now you're using your newfound wealth to make us pay for it, Jennifer accused, still standing, arms crossed defensively. Actually, I've already been helping without any of you knowing, I revealed. Brian's medical bills from his spinal injury last year, I covered those anonymously through a patient assistance foundation I established. Brian's jaw dropped. That was you? The medical debt forgiveness program that covered my surgery costs? I nodded. I've been monitoring the family's situation for months. I know about Jennifer's malpractice suits, Dad's investment losses, the second mortgage, Mom's part-time job at Nordstrom. Shock registered on each face, not just that I knew their secrets, but that I had already been providing assistance without acknowledgement or credit. You've been spying on us? Jennifer demanded, though her indignation seemed hollow. I've been concerned, I corrected. And yes, I've been helping where I could, without revealing my involvement. The question now is whether this family is capable of building an authentic relationship that isn't based on what anyone can provide materially. The silence that followed felt weighted with decades of unspoken truths. I think, Mom finally said, her voice unsteady, that we need to listen to what Wilbur is saying. Really listen, maybe for the first time. Jennifer scoffed and grabbed her purse. I don't need to be lectured about family values by someone who's been secretly investigating us. Call me when the Moral Superiority Act is finished. She stalked toward the door, pausing only briefly to add, some of us have actual lives to get back to. The front door slammed behind her, rattling family photos on the wall images of smiling faces that had always hidden the fractures beneath. Dad sighed heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 72 years. She's always been high-strung. She's always been entitled, I corrected gently, because this family made her that way. Brian moved to sit beside me on the sofa. For what it's worth, I'm sorry, Wilbur, both for how things have been and for not standing up for you more often. His simple apology, the first genuine one I'd received, loosened something tight in my chest. Thank you, I said sincerely. That means a lot. Mom wiped away tears. What happens now? It was the question I'd been asking myself for months. What did happen when the invisible child suddenly became visible? When the family's understanding of itself was fundamentally challenged? That depends, I replied carefully, on whether this family is willing to build something new. Something based on mutual respect rather than performance or provision. Dad nodded slowly, an unusual humility in his expression. I think we might be ready to try. For the first time in decades, I felt a flicker of genuine hope for my family relationships, not because of what I could offer financially, but because truth had finally been spoken aloud. The foundations had been shaken, Jennifer had stormed out, and nothing was resolved. But perhaps, finally, healing could begin. The months following that fateful Thanksgiving unfolded in ways I couldn't have predicted. The family earthquake I'd triggered required time to settle, with aftershocks continuing well into the new year. Jennifer didn't speak to me for 6 weeks after storming out of our parents' house. When she finally reached out, it wasn't with an apology, but with a carefully worded email, suggesting we move forward productively and explore synergies between our respective professional strengths. Even then, she couldn't see me as simply a brother, rather than a potential resource. My response was kind but firm. Before discussing any professional collaboration or financial assistance, I'd like to rebuild our personal relationship. Perhaps we could start with coffee next week. No business talk, just siblings catching up. Her reply came 3 days later, shorter and noticeably lacking her usual polish. Coffee sounds good. Tuesday at 2? That first meeting was awkward, with Jennifer clearly uncomfortable discussing anything beyond surface topics. But when I asked about the challenges her practice faced, something unexpected happened. Her carefully maintained facade cracked. "It's all falling apart," she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "One questionable call during surgery. One patient with complications that weren't even my fault, and suddenly I'm fighting for my professional life. 20 years of perfect work, and none of it matters now. For perhaps the first time, I saw my sister as a whole person, not the golden child who had overshadowed me, but a woman whose identity was crumbling under circumstances partly beyond her control. Her vulnerability created space for genuine connection that her success never had. I understand what it's like to have your work dismissed," I said quietly, "to feel invisible despite your best efforts." Jennifer's eyes widened slightly as recognition dawned. "I guess you would, wouldn't you?" She studied her coffee cup before adding, "I never really saw what I was doing to you, all these years." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was a beginning. With our parents, the reconciliation process followed a different path. Mom embraced the opportunity for reconnection with surprising enthusiasm, calling regularly and asking thoughtful questions about my life and work. For the first time, she seemed genuinely interested in understanding me rather than trying to reshape me into someone more like Jennifer. "I always loved you so much," she confessed during a Sunday afternoon visit, "but I didn't know how to connect with you." Jennifer and Brian were so easy to understand, their achievements fit into neat categories I recognized. Your brilliance was in areas I couldn't grasp, so I failed you by focusing on what was familiar. Her honesty touched me deeply. "I never needed you to understand the technical details, Mom. I just needed you to see me." "I see you now," she said, squeezing my hand. "I'm just sorry it took so long." Dad's journey proved more challenging. His identity had been built around being the family patriarch and provider. My success and subsequent boundary setting fundamentally challenged his self-perception. Our early conversations were strained, with Dad oscillating between defensive justification of past behavior and awkward attempts to establish himself as still somehow authoritative in my life. The breakthrough came during a fishing trip I organized for just the two of us at a lake he'd taken me to as a child. Away from the family dynamic, surrounded by nature's quiet, something shifted. "I always thought I was preparing you for the real world," he said as we sat in companionable silence, lines cast into still water, "pushing you to be tougher, more practical. I didn't realize I was actually pushing you away." "Your approval meant everything to me as a kid," I admitted. "When it never came, I learned to live without it." Dad reeled in his empty line, recasting with methodical precision. "I was wrong about you, about your work, about what constitutes success." He paused, struggling visibly with the words. "I'm proud of you, son. Not because of the money, though, that's certainly impressive, but because you built something substantial despite having no support. That takes character I'm not sure I would have had in your position." Coming from my father, this acknowledgement was monumental. Brian required the least reconciliation, having been the least dismissive over the years. Our relationship strengthened naturally through regular basketball games and occasional beers while watching sports. He became my strongest ally in navigating family dynamics, often providing perspective when old patterns threatened to reemerge. "Jennifer's always going to be Jennifer," he observed after a particularly tense family dinner where she'd reverted to subtle condescension. "But she's trying. For her, that's significant progress." As for financial matters, I established clear principles. This wouldn't be a blank check or a bailout without accountability. Instead, I created structured approaches to address each family member's needs while encouraging growth and responsibility. For my parents, I established a retirement security trust that supplemented their income and covered healthcare costs, while also paying off their second mortgage. The arrangement included regular financial counseling sessions that Dad initially resisted but eventually came to appreciate. "I should have been this responsible with our money years ago," he admitted after one session. "Maybe then we wouldn't have needed your help." "We all need help sometimes," I replied. The hardest part is accepting it graciously. For Brian, I created an educational trust for his children and provided capital for a sports training business he'd long dreamed of starting but lacked funds to pursue. His gratitude was sincere and unencumbered by entitlement, making it easy to support his endeavors. Jennifer presented the greatest challenge. Her immediate expectation was that I would simply absorb her legal costs and recapitalize her struggling practice without conditions. When I instead proposed a structured approach that included professional ethics counseling and practice management oversight, she initially balked. "I don't need oversight," she protested during a tense dinner meeting. "I need financial support to get through this rough period." "The financial support is available," I explained calmly, "but with conditions designed to address the underlying issues, not just the symptoms. Otherwise, we'll be having this same conversation again in a few years." She left angry that night, but returned a week later with reluctant acceptance. "Your terms are reasonable," she conceded. "Not what I wanted, but probably what I need." Over time, the professional ethics counseling yielded unexpected benefits, helping Jennifer recognize patterns of arrogance and corner-cutting that had contributed to her current predicament. The practice management consultants identified inefficiencies and liability risks she'd been blind to for years. "The practice is running better now than when we were at full capacity," she admitted 6 months into the program. "And I'm actually a better surgeon when I'm not trying to be the fastest and most impressive doctor in the room." Perhaps the most meaningful transformation came during the following year's Thanksgiving. A deliberate, full-circle moment I'd been both anticipating and dreading. Would old patterns reassert themselves, or had genuine change taken root? We gathered again at our parents' home, now restored to its former condition thanks to judicious improvements funded by the retirement trust. The atmosphere felt noticeably different, lighter, more genuine. Mom had insisted on cooking despite my offer to cater, saying, "Thanksgiving should be homemade, even if my hands aren't as steady as they once were." As we settled around the table, I noticed subtle but significant shifts in the family dynamic. Dad asked Brian's son about his science fair project with genuine interest. Mom made space for her daughter-in-law's contribution to the conversation, rather than dominating it. Jennifer, remarkably, listened more than she spoke. When the time came for the traditional "what we're thankful for" ritual previously, an opportunity for achievement announcements, thinly disguised as gratitude, the tone was noticeably different. "I'm thankful for second chances," Dad said simply, "and for the opportunity to know my children as the adults they've become, not just the children I thought they should be." Mom wiped away a tear. "I'm thankful for this table being full again, and for the honest conversations that have brought us back together." Brian raised his glass. "I'm thankful for my brother's generosity, not just financially, but in being willing to rebuild relationships that others might have written off as not worth saving." When Jennifer's turn came, she seemed to struggle momentarily before speaking. "I'm thankful for the hard lessons of this past year, for learning that my worth isn't measured solely by professional achievement. And," she added, looking directly at me, "for a brother who cared enough to tell difficult truths when it would have been easier to simply walk away." When my turn arrived, I found myself unexpectedly emotional. I'm thankful for the journey that brought us here. For many years, I measured success by independence, by not needing this family that hadn't needed me. I've learned that true success lies in interdependence, in relationships strong enough to withstand both failure and prosperity, honest enough to acknowledge past wrongs, and resilient enough to build something new from broken pieces. We weren't a perfect family. Jennifer still occasionally slipped into condescension. Dad sometimes reverted to old patterns of judgment. Mom still sometimes tried too hard to smooth over difficult conversations that needed to happen. But we were, undeniably, a family making genuine efforts to see and value each member. The most profound lesson I've taken from this journey is that true wealth has little to do with money. My financial success opened doors, but couldn't create authentic relationships. That required courage, honesty, and the willingness of all involved to grow beyond established patterns. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about pretending hurt never happened. It's about creating space for new experiences that gradually outweigh the painful ones. It's a daily choice to build something better, rather than remaining trapped in grievances, however justified they might be. The invisible child I once was has found not only visibility, but genuine connection. The fortune that initially commanded my family's attention has become simply one aspect of our complex shared story, neither its focus nor its foundation. Have you ever had to confront painful truths within your own family? Or found yourself needing to establish boundaries with loved ones who couldn't see your true value? I'd love to hear your stories and how you navigated these challenging waters. Please comment below with your experiences or questions. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with others who might find value in these difficult but important family discussions. Your engagement helps this channel continue providing content that explores the complex terrain of family relationships. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it offers some comfort and guidance to those navigating their own family reconciliations. Remember that healing is rarely linear, but with persistence and clear boundaries, even the deepest family wounds can begin to mend.